I'm Simone Absalom, and I'll provide a brief outline of what's expected to take place during the sitting. But before we begin, did you know that if a member shows disregard for the authority of the chair or abuses the rules of the Senate by persistently and willfully obstructing the business of the Senate or otherwise, the President shall direct the attention of the Senate to the incident and move that the senator be suspended from the service of the Senate. And the President shall put the question, no seconder be required, no amendment, no adjournment, no debate being allowed. On the agenda for this sitting, the bill shortly entitled the Emergency Powers Continuance No. 2 Resolution 2018 will be tabled and taken. The House of Representatives yesterday passed the resolution seeking to extend the current state of emergency in St. James by 3 months. It should be noted that the agenda can be adjusted with items being added or removed or even replaced. If you are planning to attend a session at Gordon House, here are some rules you need to bear in mind. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card from the office of the clerk. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed, unless authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. Now over to the proceedings.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. The report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on its deliberations on the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection, Berkshire Courts of Eltham Order 2018. The Customs Tariff Revision Amendment Resolution 2018 under the Customs Tariff Act. Auditor General's Department Information Technology Audit Report of the Registrar General's Department and the Jamaica Urban Transit Company. The Civil Service Establishment General Order 2018 Resolution under the Civil Service Establishment Act. The Emergency Powers Continuance No. 2 Resolution 2018 under the Emergency Powers Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on its deliberations on the National Housing Trust Housing Benefits Special Selection, Berkshire Courts of Eltham, Order 2018.
Chairman Samud, I noticed that Senator Sophia Binns didn't sign the report. Is there any particular reason? Fraser, Senator Binns? Given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Regulations Committee of the Senate on its deliberations on the National Housing Trust Housing Benefit Special Selection, Berkshire Courts of Eltham, Order 2018, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 2nd day of May 2018, be approved.
Thank you, Senator Samuda. Leader?
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motions. The Emergency Powers Act, the Emergency Powers Continuance No. 2 Resolution 2018. Whereas by virtue of Section 20, subsection 1 and subsection 2b of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor-General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 18th day of January 2018, the Governor-General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists in the parish of St. James, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor-General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor-General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor-General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers Regulations 2018 for securing the essentials of life to the parish of St. James during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers Regulations 2018 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 23rd day of January 2018 and in the Senate on the 26th day of January 2018. And whereas it was resolved by both Houses of Parliament that the state of public emergency declared as aforesaid and the Emergency Powers Regulations 2018 remain and continue in force until the 2nd day of May 2018. And whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned should remain in force for a further period of 3 months until the 2nd day of August 2018, and B, the Emergency Powers Regulations 2018 continue in force as altered by paragraph 3 until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers Continuance Number 2 Resolution 2018. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 18th day of January 2018 shall remain in force until the 2nd day of August 2018. 3. The Emergency Powers Regulations 2018 are hereby continued in force until the 2nd day of August 2018 with the following alterations. A. In Regulation 32, insert next after the words, the Minister, the words, on the written advice of the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police, end quote. And B. In Regulation 33, insert 1. In paragraph 1, next after the words, the Minister, and 2. In paragraph 3, next after the words, the Minister may, the words, and I quote, on the written advice of the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police. Mr. President, I beg to give further notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice? Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate? Motions for leave to introduce bills? The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained? Public business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, want to start my presentation this morning by extending condolences to the families and loved ones of victims of criminality across the island of Jamaica. And in particular, I want to send up a special prayer for the 2 policemen injured in the line of duty on Sunday in St. James, in Hatfield, in St. James. Mr. President, last night in Westmoreland, criminal gangs struck again. They struck, Mr. President, in a brazen display of wanton criminality and firepower and disregard for human life. Mr. President, as the Minister of National Security proceeds to Westmoreland and as the police on the ground seek to address the matter operationally, as I listened to the reports this morning, it almost seemed to me to be just a reminder of how blatant and how focused the criminals are on their objective and how much they disregard the state and the importance of life. We too, Mr. President, therefore, we too in this House and across Jamaica need to be as focused on our objective. We need to be focused on stamping out criminality and the criminals and returning Jamaica to a place of law and order. Mr. President, as this Honourable Chamber will recall and as stated in my motion read out 2 minutes ago, on January 18th of this year, the Governor-General proclaimed a state of public emergency in the parish of St. James for a period not exceeding 14 days. And as provided for by our laws, the period was then extended for a further 3 months by resolution of both Houses of Parliament. Mr. President, we sit today because that 3-month period expires tonight at midnight. Yesterday, in that other place, members did their part by voting unanimously among those present to extend the state of emergency for a further 3 months. And it now falls to us in this chamber to do our part. We've said it before, Mr. President, and I will say it again. The state of emergency is a necessary and important tool in the fight against crime. It is an important step in the fight against crime, and it is but one reflection of this government's commitment to stamping out rampant criminality in order to provide a safe and secure environment for each and every Jamaican. One where we can fulfill our aspirations to sleep with our doors and windows open. This is not an overnight process, Mr. President, but we are committed to the effort. We are committed to the fight. Mr. President, today we are seeking to create the opportunity to maintain and to build on the gains made in the fight against the high level of crime negatively impacting our way of life. Mr. President, in 2017, the parish of St. James recorded 355 murders. And in 2018, the year started there with a surge in violent incidents. The state of emergency was declared. And I feel it's important that I highlight the numbers reflecting that crime in St. James has experienced a drastic decline since these measures were implemented. Mr. President, 62 less murders have occurred in St. James for the period January 1 to April 30, 2018, as compared to the corresponding period last year. Incidents of wounding are down by 76%, and shootings are down by 60%. Mr. President, the security forces have identified 33 active gangs ranging from small, which is less than 25 people, to medium and large, which is above 50 people, active gangs, Mr. President. They're made up of mostly young men, boys, and even women. They are killers, Mr. President. They are people who rape young girls trying to get an education. They are people who kill young boys who are not interested in a life of crime because they don't want to become a shutter. They are killed to send a message. Mr. President, they kill honest businessmen who don't want to cooperate with extortion. Mr. President, they create mayhem and instability and fear in communities by shootings like the one reported in Grangehill, Westmoreland yesterday. Mr. President, they create that instability because they want to assert their power against the state. Regretfully, the reductions achieved in St. James have not taken us to the place where we need to be. Even with the welcome reduction in the number of murders, there can be little debate on the fact that Jamaica's murder rate and crime levels are abnormal, and normal policing will not be sufficient. Mr. President, we are not there yet, simply put. For many years now, in fact, normal initiatives have been implemented to stem what are abnormal levels of crime, and have been for some time. But I say this, Mr. President, Jamaicans going about their daily lives in St. James, the majority of them, are asking for a continuation of action which is beyond normal. They are asking for the state of emergency to stay. We have heard a few cries by persons who live in Kingston stating that they believe that the state of emergency should end. But we are pleased that the opposition has, in that other place, indicated their full support for its extension at this time. Mr. President, it is quite simply the right thing to do. The security forces have said they need more time. The citizens have said they need more time, they want more time. The business community has also made it clear that they want the state of emergency to remain. They recognize, Mr. President, that Rome was not built in a day, and that it would be, and I'll borrow a word from a noted commentator on the ground in St. James, it would be foolhardy to discontinue the state of emergency at this time. It would be foolhardy to discontinue something which is working as soon as it starts to bear results. You don't stop when you start to make progress, Mr. President. You push on, you press on. The fight against crime takes strength. It takes fortitude. It takes stick-to-itiveness. We have been nowhere near normal, and a reduction from what is quite simply not enough. Mr. President, it is at this time that we must build on the gains. It is at this time that we must build the trust in our citizens, that we must enhance the trust that has started to develop. Mr. President, this is the time at which we make it clear to the criminals that they cannot wait us out. Mr. President, more time, quite simply, is needed to realistically address and erode crime and violence in St. James as elsewhere. Mr. President, we need to remember that a state of emergency was implemented and is interrupting the cycle of violence, allowing the state to take back control from criminals. The state of emergency assists and is assisting with the return of public order. The state of emergency is, as we speak, providing the opportunity for information gathering and intelligence gathering for the dismantling of these gangs and their insidious criminal networks, finding not only the perpetrators, Mr. President, because we also need to find the facilitators. Mr. President, the state of emergency provides the conditions for a return to law and order, that is, what we want to be considered normal. Mr. President, the opposition has continued its call for a crime plan. And I want to issue a caution in this regard, because I believe that it's important, and I've said this before, that we are not and don't allow ourselves to be so caught in a narrative linked to the idea of a document called a crime plan that we miss the reality of what is going on. Mr. President, Plan Secure Jamaica was outlined in the first budget presentation of the Prime Minister. As I've explained before, Mr. President, in this chamber and elsewhere, that is the overarching national security and defense plan, of which crime forms one part. National security forms only one part. This overall plan, Mr. President, has since been supported by the 5-pillar crime strategy, which has been enunciated by the Minister of National Security, which has been shared across the island and which is available on the website of the Ministry of National Security. Mr. President, I have to repeat it because it has not been repeated enough, and I think that there are voices which are either trying or inadvertently creating some confusion on the issue. The 5 pillars are, quite simply, effective policing, swift and sure justice, situational crime prevention, social development, and reducing of reoffending. The entire gamut of activities in the fight against crime are identified, Mr. President. They are documented. Everyone can go to the ministry's website and download the 214-page document. We are now in action mode. The strategy is being implemented by means including operational plans, which will not be shared. Work is underway. Several of these approaches are, however, medium to long-term measures, scoped to address the monster of crime that it is, and that has been spiraling out of control for years, and therefore don't necessarily generate the immediate tangible benefits that we all want to see and feel, Mr. President, the benefits that we will only get if we stay the course. Mr. President, we're also addressing fundamentals that had not been addressed for years. There are initiatives like better resources being provided to the National Parenting Support Commission that goes into communities and establishes parenting places like the one recently established in Mount Salem, St. James. Mr. President, it's like the Project Hope, which is providing opportunities for young people, providing an alternative to the gangs. Mr. President, the expansion of the Uniformed Cadet Corps, the creation of a National Service Corps under the efficient training hand of the Jamaica Defence Force, and which will therefore provide a partially trained ready pool of young people for recruitment by the JDF and the JCF. Young men who might otherwise have gone elsewhere, another route. As we have said before, Mr. President, we have to become better recruiters than the gangs, and this is what we are doing. Mr. President, people call for increased policing, but we have to increase the number of police in order for that to happen. So we are increasing the recruitment capacity of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. We have expanded the barracks, and we have entered into partnerships with institutions like UE. And together with recruitment being supported by 100% polygraphy to ensure the quality of the persons that are entering the force, and like the increased mobility that we have provided, Mr. President. The last figure that I had was 159 motorcycles and 416 cars and trucks, with more to come. Mr. President, we have provided 4,500 ballistic vests. The previous ones had expired 5 years before, and an additional 1,500 are to come. The improvement of the conditions within which our police have to work, by repairing police stations across the island, Mr. President, and by building new ones where required. Mr. President, we are providing additional resources to protect our borders, to turn the fight against the inward flow of guns into our country, into our communities. And Mr. President, beyond that, I wanted to make it clear, no criminal, and especially the organized criminals, the ones that read The Economist and follow politicians on social media, the ones that are actively networked, socially and otherwise, Mr. President, as they plan. Mr. President, they must never have our action plans.
Thank you.
They must never know what we are planning to do exactly and when. Already we can say, Mr. President, that criminals are not now able to plan as they used to. And we intend to keep that strategic advantage as we do have now in St. James, in St. Catherine North, for as long as we can. Mr. President, we can say that criminal activities are being disrupted, and we know that they are more vulnerable outside of their communities, outside of their comfort zones, than they are, of course, otherwise, if we had not disrupted them. So, Mr. President, whether they stay or whether they flee, we are committed to getting them, and we have been. Mr. President, this is not to say that the government is pursuing an exclusionary approach in its fight against crime. The Vale Royal talks have been reinstated, and they provide an opportunity to share sensitive matters related to crime with the opposition. Discussions have started in that regard, and commitments have already been made. There is more work to be done, and it will be done. We have also invited the opposition spokesperson on national security to attend meetings of the National Security Council. That way, he can not only hear firsthand from the heads of the security forces, but he can directly give input. Mr. President, we are confident that given the sensitivity of information management in the fight against crime, that this is a good balance of information sharing at this time and at this stage. As the opposition made clear yesterday, Mr. President, I believe it was the opposition spokesperson on national security who said, there is only one government at any point in time. He said, we are ultimately responsible and we must do the work. And guess what? We are. Yeah. We're taking responsibility and we're doing the work. Mr. President, we, however, actively seek the cooperation of others in this fight against crime. We seek the support of civil society, of the opposition, of the church, of the business communities, of the average citizen, Mr. President. But this cooperation should not be conditional on the provision of information which might otherwise undermine the fight against crime. And it shouldn't be conditional on the development of a document in a form envisioned or conceptualized by any particular group. Mr. President, since the state of emergency was declared in St. James, 8 of the most wanted men in Jamaica, known for activities, murderous activities, in the parish of St. James, have been arrested or killed fleeing arrest. Approximately 133 persons in St. James have been arrested and charged, including 22 for murder. As has been described by the Prime Minister, Mr. President, we have a triple threat of guns, gangs, and dons. We need to address them. We need to root them out. This, regretfully, cannot be achieved in a neatly prescribed 3-month period. Would that it could be? It would have been done already. Mr. President, there will also not be new and exciting and overwhelmingly different arguments or reasons put forward for the support of each stage of this process in this fight against crime. Because the fundamentals remain the same, and they have for some time, and they are entrenched and ingrained. Mr. President, we have identified 20 communities which are the main generators of violence in Jamaica. And if we had the resources, we would implement these enhanced measures in each and every one of them at the same time. However, what we can do and what we are doing is, as we achieve a state as close to normality as we can in areas where we have a state of emergency established, we must acknowledge the results that we are getting. We must acknowledge that the state of emergency has this far demonstrated that it is, in fact, the most effective tool that we have in our box. We have never said it was the crime plan or the anti-crime strategy. We have also never said that it would last forever. We have never said that it should become the new normal. It is one of the tools available to us, and therefore, and where it has been implemented, Mr. President, let me just re-emphasize that point, it has worked. So we therefore have to use it to its fullest benefit. We can't get iffy and butty part way through the process. We can't get mealy-mouthed about whether or not we support it. We can't appear to the criminals to be wavering, debating, or being divided on the position. We must stand together. Mr. President, there's another point I want to address on the assertion that and it's been making the rounds, that states of emergency are causing increased violence elsewhere. Now, there is such a thing as a balloon effect, and this is a serious issue which is being addressed operationally. So I can't say it too much clearly. But even though we acknowledge increases in certain communities, we also have to acknowledge that there are reductions in other communities, and I mean outside of the state of emergency. There are reductions in communities across the island as well. So it's not an entirely solid and conclusive argument to draw this causal link between the increases where they exist and argue that they are all caused by the state of emergency or the ZOSOs, and they are therefore a reason to discontinue them. The situation is more nuanced than that. So let us not underplay the overall picture, Mr. President. The murder rate in Jamaica in February 2018 was up 25% as against the same period last year, as against February 2017. In April, it was up 5.6% year on year. What that means, Mr. President, is that the increases in other communities have not outweighed the lives saved through the implementation of the states of emergency and the ZOSOs. Mr. President, this means that while we have not entirely reversed the trend that had taken us to 25%, it has been significantly retarded and can continue if we have the collective fortitude, with Jamaica always front of mind, to do what works. Mr. President, before I close, I just want to reiterate two important points made by our Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, yesterday. Firstly, Mr. President, he made the point that violent circumstances created the need for the public emergency to be declared. And when it was declared, it was done based on intelligence, using hotspots and demographic mapping. Mr. President, so therefore, while the government notes concerns raised about the number of persons detained, we want to also assure that this has not just been done arbitrarily. This has also been guided by the same mapping and demographic data. Secondly, he made the point that persons who have been detained have been subject to treatment that falls within the remit of safe custody, and there have been no human rights infringements. Mr. President, deliberate and careful due diligence procedures will continue to guide this process. Where at the start of the process concerns were raised, they have been addressed, and any concern, I believe, for example, he gave the example at Barrett Town lockup, there were concerns from the very first week identified and addressed. Concerns regarding timeliness of food, I believe, was raised, not that it wasn't available, but its timeliness, and certain other matters which I'm sure the opposition will raise. Mr. President, the appeals tribunals have been established and they have been functioning well. Mr. President, it is our duty and our responsibility to protect all our citizens, all Jamaicans. Our crime rate is not normal, and so the measures we take, once constitutional, must until we return to normal, be beyond normal. Some persons may wish to focus on the small percentage of persons detained and charged, who have been rather arrested and charged. But while the number of detainees is not something to celebrate, and we don't celebrate it, that has been a part of the road which has gotten to this place of 62 less deaths, 70% reductions in woundings, and 60% less shootings. This has been the road that has been saving lives. And even listening, Mr. President, to the voice of some detainees, Mr. President, who were interviewed this morning, you recognize that most people get it. The detainees interviewed, Mr. President, said even though, and I will paraphrase, that they had suffered some discomfort, or one, indicated that he didn't have his release paper, he had been detained before, and the release paper allowed him to go to the front of, would have allowed him to go to the front of line, which he did anyway, with the assistance of the police, that they don't want the state of emergency to be discontinued anyway, because what had been going on in their communities, as they put it, are not normal. So things have to be done differently. Mr. President, before I close, I want to just highlight the changes being proposed, or rather being made, to the regulations, in particular to regulations 32 and 33. Regulations, Mr. President, or rather the amendments are being made in response to concerns raised by the opposition in the other place. And Regulation 33, Mr. President, was requested for amendment. It is the paragraph that deals with detention orders made by the Minister of National Security. And the proposal was, and which has been accepted, that the Minister only acts in those circumstances on the written recommendation of the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police. And it was proposed by us, therefore, that Regulation 32, which is worded in like manner but deals with confinement to the place of residence, that those also be subject to the same amendments. And we want to make it abundantly clear, Mr. President, that although the amendments will relate to the extension, if and when granted, Mr. President, previously issued detention orders were only issued on the advice of both the Chief of Defence Staff and the Commissioner of Police, albeit not in writing, for operational efficiency. Mr. President, in the totality of the circumstances, I invite and even urge my colleague senators to give their strong support for the continuation of the state of public emergency operating in St. James. Mr. President, I invite and encourage my colleague senators to present a united front against criminality in Jamaica. We should never, Mr. President, underestimate the value of demonstrating to criminals that we're not divided on the fight against criminality. And Mr. President, I cannot take my seat without restating a position, or rather a call that I made the last time that I was here, which was that I addressed this issue, which was the state of public emergency in St. Catherine North. I urge, Mr. President, I urge my fellow citizens, I urge each and every Jamaican to play their part in the fight against crime. If you see or suspect criminal activity, if you see persons who look suspicious in your community and you do not know them, report it. If you see a wanted person, report it. Call 311 or 811. The confidentiality of these numbers have never been breached. They are answered outside of Jamaica. Mr. President, you can use these numbers, and people can use these numbers to collect rewards for guns and ammunition, and they can use them to collect rewards for wanted people. Mr. President, together we can win this fight against crime. We can return to a safe and secure Jamaica. Mr. President, in that context, I commend the regulations as amended and the resolution to extend the state of public emergency in St. James to the members of the Senate for their consideration. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Morris, you're speaking now. I understand you have to leave us a bit early, so
yes, Mr.
I
President.
recognize you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I do rise to make my contribution to the debate on this resolution. And, Mr. President, I start by agreeing with the final comments made by the leader of government business, that together we can win the war against crime and violence. Mr. President, it is because I have that belief why myself and my colleagues are here today. In fact, Mr. President, I am scheduled to speak Minister of Education at Fernport High School at 12 today. But because of how important I view, and we on this side view, this resolution, we are here 7 out of 8. 7 out of 8 of us on the opposition side are here. Mr. President, it is extremely important that as a country we win the fight against crime and violence. And we have to do so. But as the leader of government business says, we have to do it together. But we can't do it together, Mr. President, if there are distrust, bad-mouthing, and negative campaigning, and a situation where you have individuals labeling and creating a narrative that the opposition is not in support of the fight against crime and violence. And I find it particularly troubling and offensive, Mr. President, because I sit among my colleagues elsewhere, and I know the hearts of the men and women that are a part of the political organization that I am a proud member of. And I tell you, Mr. President, if I had any inkling that any member of my organization was going to be wishing for or wanting the government to fail in its crime plan, I wouldn't be associated with them, Mr. President. I wouldn't be associated with them.
I would come out and
because the truth is that crime and violence affects all of us in the society. All of us in the society. You know, when everything that happens to persons with disabilities, Senator Webby, they tend to call me. And I tell them I don't have no responsibility for them, in a governmental sense. So everything they call me. And I got a call one morning to tell me about a blind man in the Coronation Market who was selling there and just accidentally, just going through and accidentally step on eggs being sold by a lady. And the blind man was stabbed severely in his neck. So violence and criminality affects all of us and touch us in some shape or form. So we can't condone it. So we come to the issue at hand here now, which is the extension of the state of emergency. And Mr. President, I am supporting and giving my support. But Mr. President, the leader of government business mentioned that the opposition, along with others in the society, have been calling for a crime plan. But I want to remind the leader of government business that from as far back as about 2016, thereabout, the government promised the country a crime plan. And in recent times, the government has said that it is putting together a plan for agreement with the opposition. So I can't understand why it is that you want to pour cold water on the calls for the government to declare a crime plan. A plan is a guide as to how it is that you are going to be dealing with the issue. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, when you look at how the Constitution envisage how a state of emergency be treated, it never envisaged a state of emergency to be a crime plan. And what I am detecting is that the state of emergency is the government's crime plan. That is what I am detecting.
It's your primary tool.
Because in the Constitution, it expressly states the time frames for which the state of emergency can be held, 14 days in the first instance, and it has to seek permission not exceeding 90 days.
2/3 majority.
And it requires 2/3 majority of the parliament, because it requires all individuals in the parliament to do a detailed analysis of the circumstances for extension. Now, the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, we are saying, and I said it when the first extension was sought, that in between, in that interregnum, we must ensure that we put together a plan, because this thing cannot continue for eternity. And based on the expressions that I've heard from the leader of government business, based on the thank you very much for your protection, Mr. President. Based on the expressions that I am hearing, Mr. President, it seems as if come August 2, we will be back seeking another extension. And that is where Mr. President, it is troubling for me. Because there are some fundamental issues that is driving crime that we have to address. And in my last presentation, Mr. President, I posited that because from 1838, we have not addressed in a fundamental way the issues, the social issues affecting our people, we continue to see this spiral in terms of crime and violence. And when I say the social issues, I'm speaking to the issues of education, and I know that the Minister of Education will say that we are doing this and we are doing that. But the fact of the matter, Minister, you would require a lot more resources to deal with some of the issues that I'm speaking about. Absolutely. Then Mr. President, when I talk about social issues, I'm talking about the level of sanitation and the sort of decrepit conditions that citizens in the inner city communities have to live under. And I mentioned in my last presentation in March, you know, just walking through an inner city community one day and just seeing raw sewage running on the roadside. And I said to myself, how do we expect as a society? How do we expect as a society for these people to live in this sort of condition and aren't what the DJ Bounty Killer said, mad, angry, and miserable? We have to make sure that we improve those social conditions. And another thing, Mr. President, is the fact that the police have their hands full in terms of fighting crime. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, boy, the debate, I'm so passionate about the debate. That's why, you know, they will understand down there in third court. It's their interest. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, we have the police doing so many things that they are not supposed to be doing. And I get the feeling that we are setting up the police. Because take for example, police have to be doing counseling and all of that sort of stuff in communities. But that is not the role of the police. Right? The point that I am making is that apart from the cadre of police that we need to have more social workers in the system. Social workers are trained individuals who are equipped to deal with counseling and pointing individuals into a direction that can assist them to overcome some of the challenges that they are confronted with. Challenges that have led to an increase in domestic violence. But they just don't have any individual who is professionally trained that they can go to talk about their problems. And we need to expand that cadre of social workers in our country. Mr. President, it is my firm belief that between now and August 2, the government should ensure that it have a clear plan developed which include the stakeholders, and I'm not just talking the opposition, but all those Jamaicans who are interested in taming this monster of criminality. If we don't do it, Mr. President, we are going to come back here in August, and I tell you,
and December.
I tell you, Senator Crawford, I am warning the government I am warning the government. Make sure that you spend the next 3 months consulting the relevant stakeholders. Because I tell you, I am very clear as to my position where criminality is concerned. But I don't know if when you come in August, if you come back to me in August, I'm going to adopt the same sympathetic approach. Minister, I am at one in the fight against criminality. But show me, convince me, and put your words to action in terms of making sure that you draft, include, and consult the relevant stakeholders in developing a unified approach to this monster. And I am, Senator Skeffrey, I am hopeful. I am hopeful. Right? No, but we're not saying you have to make it public. We're not saying that you make it public. Right? You can make the consultation public. You can make the consultation public, but the details of the plan is a totally different thing. Right? It's a totally different thing. Right? Make sure that you include the relevant stakeholders. And Minister, as I take my seat and depart, and it's no disrespect to my colleagues, right? I want this nonsense about the opposition not supportive of crime, the fight against crime and violence. I want this nonsense to stop. Because you cannot, on one hand, asking for cooperation and support, and then you are beating us in the back to say you not supportive of crime and violence, the fight against crime and violence. And it is not true. It is dishonest. It is hurtful to the individuals on this side who know their position and their stance on crime and violence. And you are not going to get stakeholder buy-in if you are beating and bashing critical stakeholders like the opposition. May it please you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Safe travel. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, before I begin, I wish to also extend welcome to the Heinz Simonich students who are here. In fact, some of the faces I recognize. And that is a school that is located in the division in St. James that I represent. So I'm happy to see them here today. Mr. President, I stand as a Montegonian, man from St. James, in full support of this resolution for the extension of the state of emergency. You know, and I'm happy. There was a proposed amendment from the opposition in the lower house, and it was accepted. And what that indicates, Mr. President, is that this side, this administration, is also seeking to work, in addition to the comments made by leader of government business in respect to bail royal tax and so forth, that we are prepared to work with the opposition in respect to the fight against crime, and the amendments were accepted. I believe that you participated in respect to the wording. But you know, yes, and you know, I was just looking at that particular amendment which was proposed and then comparing it with some other positions and comments that were made by the opposition. Because those amendments, particularly to Regulation 33, asked for the inclusion of the Jamaica Constabulary and the Jamaica Defence Force in respect to, or put them as a buffer between the minister and the issuing of a detention order. So that is the buffer proposed by the opposition. But they turn around and then make a contradictory statement where they seek to, I'm not cussing you, but I'm just asking you to be consistent. And I will tell you why I ask for the consistency. Because you criticize the same JDF and the constabulary in respect to abuse, and I'm going to go on to address those issues. In respect to St. James, you go on in respect to making comments which cause concerns in St. James as to whether the opposition was going to support the extension that was being applied for. Unnecessary panic. I got calls, Mr. President, from many persons in the parish worried as to whether this extension would be approved. So I was in fact pleased yesterday with the announcement of the vote, where 53 members present in the House, including those from the opposition, voted in support of the extension of the state of emergency. You know, and the comment in respect to the human rights breaches is something that in the St. Catherine extension that was being sought, it was something that was addressed. I spoke to it briefly at that point in time, because when we started in January 18 in St. James, there were issues. Admittedly, there were issues. And those issues, I believe, were satisfactorily worked out. That, Mr. President, if you visit the Montego Bay lockup, the last time I went there, which was last week, Thursday, there was one person in the holding area that was awaiting processing to be released. The police have been able to process the persons and release them expeditiously. And what the police have also done, in part of that processing, is that where persons have been determined not to have birth certificates or relevant identification, that they have worked with them, sent them to the RGD with documentation for the process of them getting their birth certificate sorted out. The police is participating in that process. And so I see that that is an improvement in the lives of those individuals who may have unfortunately been detained in the whole process. So work is happening in that regard. Mr. President, we speak of the breach of human rights. But what greater human right can be breached than the loss of life? That is the primary human right. And you know, we have heard the numbers stated to say that when you make the comparison to 2017, you're talking about 60 lives being saved. But if you look on the trajectory that we were going on in St. James between 2012 and 2017, where you had an increase almost every year of 20%, that 60 could have been higher, 80, probably 100 lives have been saved. And the persons that we hear making this call about ceasing the extension, not having an extension, or stopping it with immediate effect, I think that they were they are not properly focused and aware of the situation. We heard it from the public defender asking for an immediate cessation of the state of public emergency. Yes. I heard it from the chairman of the Peace Management Initiative. And what I found contradictory, because when I heard it and I made inquiries, because the PMI have violence interrupters who operate within these communities. And I spoke with violence interrupters who are on the ground working with the communities. In retirement, in Granville, in Flankers, and in Canterbury. And every one of those violence interrupters with whom I spoke said that the state of emergency must be extended. We have been working with the communities. They feel that they have been able to capture several persons who could fall into the category of being violence producers, or maybe heading in that direction. But they have been able to capture them. Not all of them, and there are other concerns that they do have. But the work has started. The work has started. The work has started, and stakeholders meetings have been held, including state agencies and persons from social organizations. And Mr. President, certain things have already been done in respect to the restoration of law and order in the urban center and working with communities in order to improve those communities and improve the lives of those persons within communities. And when they compare it, Mr. President, with a time prior to the state of emergency, and that is why 90% of the residents of St. James support the extension. Because when they compare it to what existed before, they couldn't go to church, children couldn't go to school, you could not have social activities within these very same communities. And we are finding that there is a change in this short period that we have had the state of emergency. The business sector is in full support in St. James. The Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce president has stated that they are in full support. Because what was happening in the urban center in St. James is that persons were being gunned down, people were being robbed. You had mayhem in the urban center. Order is being restored. The fear of crime is being reduced. And the support of the business sector is here. The support of law enforcement, they say they need more time. And you know, I heard comments earlier in respect to the tribunal, when the comment was made by the leader of opposition business, to say that the tribunal in St. James has been set up and is working, because they met over several days. And I have a report. I heard comments in the lower house to say that persons were in limbo. But the ruling of the tribunal, I have it here, Mr. President. And in respect to the detention orders, they have indicated that without detention orders, they don't have jurisdiction. But they have made it clear from their own ruling, and I will read paragraph 22, where persons were detained without a detention order. And what they have said quite clearly is that a detainee is entitled to pursue habeas corpus proceedings. For example, pursuant to Section 286 of the Judicature Parish Courts Act, in order to secure his or her release, should there be failure by the relevant authorities to adhere to the procedure indicated in Regulation 30. The jurisdiction of the parish court judge is affirmed under the regulations and is not ousted by the relevant provisions of the Constitution, the Emergency Powers Act, or these regulations. That is the ruling of the tribunal. No. If we disagree with it, if we disagree with that position, or we don't think that it is working to the benefit of the detainees, then the person who I believe, and they were there, the public defender was also a part of the tribunal. They were represented. Instead of saying something that is not in your purview to say, cease the state of emergency immediately, deal with the human rights issue. If you think that there is a conflict, take the matter elsewhere and get a proper declaration in respect to it. But don't take on something, I believe, that is not in your portfolio. So I think the public defender was wrong in the comments that she made in respect to the state of emergency, its continuation or extension. You know, we have heard also the reference to restore normal policing. Yes, that is where we would all want to go. But you know, if we reflect in Jamaica over the past probably 15 years, I don't know if we have had normal policing operating in Jamaica for that period of time. Because we don't even see police officers wearing the #1 uniform. What they're wearing, have been wearing, and it's not just since the state of emergency. It has been for many, many years. Because of the change that we have been seeing and the increase in crime and violence. We have been seeing our police officers wearing paramilitary, walking up and down with M16. That is not normal policing. We have been having curfews and curfews and curfews in many communities. That is not normal policing. So we have to deal with situations as we find them. And that is why I also find it strange that when the opposition says, today, boy, 3 months down the road, I don't know what I will be doing. I'm not going to support extension. It makes me wonder, because I believe that what should take place is what exists at the particular moment in time. We have read it in the public space. Creating what I said was contradictory statements and causing panic in the community. Mr. President, when I looked on what took place yesterday in Grange Hill, Westmoreland, yesterday, between 8:30 in the morning and 8:30 in the evening, in 12 hours. Yes, but I'm showing you what it is that we have been confronted with. We confronted that in St. James, and it is being dealt with, and the state of emergency is reducing it. I'm speaking about a situation that is grave, and it supports us taking the state of emergency through to its completion and ensure that we get things back to normal. But let us look at what existed in Westmoreland yesterday. And then we look on what, which is similar to what existed in St. James. That's what I'm saying. Is that, Mr. President, between 8:30 in the morning and 8:30 in the evening yesterday, 19 persons were shot and injured. In one incident, which is something that we saw in St. James, 41 5.56 expended cartridges were picked up, 10 7.62 cartridges, and 16 9mm cartridges. That is what took place in Grange Hill yesterday. That is what previously took place in the parish of St. James. And we have to ensure that this process that we have started, that have reduced that situation in St. James, that we carry through to the end. The violence producers are found, the gangs are dismantled, the weapons of mass destruction are found and taken out of the hands of these criminals. So, Mr. President, you know, we hear all types of comments. Persons criticize state of emergency because of other reasons, that it suppresses economics. You know, the mayor of Spanish Town said something that was quite interesting. Previously, before the state of emergency in St. Catherine, they were collecting $20,000 out of the bus park every day. Since the state of emergency, the municipal corporation in St. Catherine have been collecting $60,000 under the state of emergency. So what existed, you're finding the reverse and the return to normalcy, to law and order. So let us get away from this nitpicking, trying to pull apart, tear apart. If there are issues within the state of emergency, let us fix them. Let us fix them. Don't tear it apart. Let us support the law enforcement, the police, the Jamaica Defense Force, those members of those two organizations that go out there day to day, that we can sleep in our beds at night, that we can live in peace. Let us support them. Let us not criticize them and tear them apart and say, but you're abusing and it's abuse and it's abuse. I don't see that. And I think that they are doing a mighty good job. And I don't talk from second-hand information. I go there myself and determine what is right and what is not so right. Well, you know, so, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I fully support this extension. I speak on behalf of the people of St. James, with whom I interact, and they are fully supportive of the extension. If it so pleases you, Mr. President.
Yes. I have work.
Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Just turn off the microphone, please. Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I feel in the mood today to do a little teaching. Some of my students are here. They're not my students in the class, but they told me they were looking at some of my math videos on YouTube. They were learning a little math. So, yes, they were tired of the blue suits. So I'm going to have to give them a next suit today, you know what I mean? But I feel to do a little teaching. So, President, there's a concept called productivity. And productivity really is a method of analyzing the ratio of input to output. So basically, when you want to understand something being effective or productive, you say, what is the level of input and what is the level of output? And productivity increases when the input ratio to output, where output is greater than the ratio of input. So if you had 1 input to 4 output, then productivity increase if you have 1 input to 6 output. And productivity decrease where the input to output, where the reverse occur. Thank you very much. So full marks. So therefore you will find that if the original was 1 to 4, if it becomes 5 to 4, then you are losing productivity. So it's important for us to understand, therefore, that our productivity is a combination. It results from a combination of effectiveness and efficiency. So you get productivity, you get a better outcome if you become more effective, or you become more efficient, or both. Now, effectiveness is doing the right thing, simply put. And efficiency is doing the thing right. So if you're not doing the right thing, you can be ineffective, but highly efficient, doing very good the bad thing. And you can be effective, but very inefficient, doing the right thing, but do it the wrong way. Now, it's important for us to understand that, because we're coming to a conversation of whether or not this thing is working. And if it's working, you're saying it's productive. You're saying that the inputs you're putting in are giving us better outputs. Now, I'm not going to speak to Mobile today because everybody said Mobile people want it. And to tell you the truth, I am so disheartened and disillusioned with the system that I am not fighting for people. I fight with people, but I not fight for them. So if Mobile want it, fine. If Mobile is willing to accept, where 1,930 people were detained, of which only 22 were charged for murder. That is a 1.13%. 1.13%. Now I see some kids, my kids upstairs. If you go to your teacher with 1.13%, what would the teacher say? If you go with President Chu to my students, you say that you are, I beg you some protection, because I'm teaching. The penny section don't disrupt. I'm teaching right now. Mr. President, they said that intelligence directed their approach. It was said right here this morning. They said further that 1,930 people were detained through intelligence. They then said 133 were charged, of which 22 were charged for murder. Now, every time somebody get up and support the state of emergency, they talk about murder. They said that is the ultimate thing we're trying to arrest. 22, wait on the mathematics. 22, 1 second, no man. 22, I know you don't know the maths, you know. 22 divided by 1,930.
I'm going to ask you, anybody who interrupt the teacher will be sent to the naughty corner.
Yes, detention for all of them. Detention, sir. No, sir. If your intelligence is carrying an outcome of 1.13%, then that's inefficient. And if it is inefficient, it is likely to be unproductive. I come further, sir, and as I say, I'm so disheartened. You know, normally, my uncle will tell you, on average, since 2007, I've been doing 15 to 20 graduations at any given year. There was one day last year that I started in Rhodes Hall or whatever down in Hanover, then I had one in Clarendon, I missed one in Kingston, and then I had half a tree primary. I feel so defeated that this year I only accept 3. I only accept 3. Many. But I don't know if the fight is working. So I'm not talking for Mobile today. What I'm talking for is for the rest of the country. Now, Mr. President, we are looking on productivity. Now, just for an understanding, because you know we're teaching today. If you're going to compare, you have to compare like with like. You have to compare orange with orange. You can't compare apples with oranges. So therefore, we're going to compare the period of 4 months that the state of emergency have been in place and the period, similar period the year before, that the state of emergency had not been in place. Now there's this thing where they want us to believe that crime is not a national problem and the government is not a national government. So therefore they keep saying in St. James, in St. James, in St. James. But crime is a national problem and the government is a national government. So therefore, when you come to Parliament, you never talk to St. James, you talk to Westmoreland. When you come to Parliament and start to go on, like ever about them thing where you call them neighborhood watch, the government is not no neighborhood watch. The government have a national responsibility. Now let's look if it is effective, the state of emergency in fighting national crime. Because Mobile wasn't the only problem. Last year we had 1,600 and odd murders in Jamaica. Not in Mobile, in Jamaica. Make a look on it now. Let me talk to my kids. Stop your eyes. Of the 19 police divisions, there is an increase in crime in 13 of them. Of the 19 police divisions, there is an increase in crime in 13 of them. Make a look on some. This is data presented by Jamaica Constabulary Force periodic crime statistics. And we are measuring January 1st to April 28, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. So therefore, the period that the state of emergency have been in place has been 2018, January to April, thus far. In Kingston Central, there has been a reduction, 25%. In Kingston Eastern, there has been a reduction, 16. In Kingston Central, a reduction, 45%. In Kingston Eastern, an increase of 81%. This is murder we are talking about now, and violent crimes. In Kingston Western, increase of 3.1%. I figure the proximity of West Kingston to the Denham Town Zozo police presence. 3.1%. In St. Andrew Central, 45% increase. In St. Andrew South, 209% increase. In St. Andrew North, minus 5.9%. That means it's decreased. St. Catherine North, 25.6% increase. St. Catherine South, it has remained even. St. Thomas, 85% increase. St. James, 66% decrease. Wonderful. Trelawney, 75% increase. Westmoreland before yesterday, 16.3% increase. St. Mary, 100% increase. Portland, 150% increase. This is 2018 January to April versus 2017 January to April. This is the period before there was a state of emergency. This is the nation before there was a state of emergency. You stop your hands. Clarendon. They can't distract me. They can't distract me. When we are teaching at Denham Town, we have students who are more disruptive.
Senator Hill, don't disturb.
Clarendon, 25%. St. Elizabeth, 40%. In the nation, there has been a 5.8% increase. Now, a speaker before suggested that in January there was a 25% increase, and so therefore it is increasing at a decreasing rate. That would be true. However, in March there was a 4% increase. Therefore, between March and April, it is increasing at an increasing rate. So when you come now and say that there is no balloon effect, let me explain the balloon effect. The balloon effect means that air is in the balloon, you squeeze the balloon in one section, the air moves to the other section. Russell Hammond, who was a farmer, hold on, when everybody that talk, me never disturb nobody. Russell Hammond, who is a businessman, a former candidate for the Jamaica Labour Party, who, like you, lives in his area, Westmoreland. He said, before this yesterday, before 9 people get shot, he said that the people from Montego Bay was escaping Montego Bay, heading into Westmoreland and creating mayhem. But hold on, if you accept that we need a national, why are you here with only a small amount? You know what? Hold on, Mr. President, you know what some people remind me of? There was this little boy at KC, he used to run 400 meters. Him always come last, you know, Mr. President. Not me, no. I come second to last. Him always come last. And this little fellow, the coach said, man, you come last. He said, no, sir, I win the first 20 meters. What importance is the first 20 meters if him come last? To him, he win the first 20 meters. So when you come, well, let me tell you what I'm demanding. I am saying to Augustown, demand your pound of flesh from the national government. I'm saying to Westmoreland, demand your pound of flesh from the national government. I'm saying to Clarendon, demand your pound of flesh. Because there's a clear correlation between the availability of police in their areas. The police said in Westmoreland yesterday, they were incapable to respond. Jesus Christ. So therefore, allow me please. Allow me. Because you see, last week somebody dared to my heart the last time. He said he thought it was working, so I'm going to do my research because I know he don't have no ill will. Somebody dear to my heart, I know he's not going to support something for political advantage.
Hey, look at you.
No, my mother talked to him and I said, if he ever try it again. Somebody dear to my heart. So when him saying support it, I think that because you see sometimes the story given is not the truth. Let us look. There is proof on mature reflection that this is not working now. But let us... No, man, I pass it over. I have many, I knew that somebody would have wanted to see something. A student want to revise. Yeah, some students don't have no book, even have a rental. You have a book rental. So we have seen that is not working now. No, you can't really judge everything by now. There's some things, as my grandmother said, as leaf go river bottom, it rotten. So there's some things we can't judge by now. It now work now, but let's look if it is likely to work in the future. Let's look if it's likely to work in the future. So when we do the analysis now, if it's likely to work in the future, I said, what are the variables that are contributing to the act of crime? I'm not going now to say what make criminal. I say what create the act of crime. The two biggest variables are one, guns. 82% of the murders was created by guns. And this me get it from. Me not make up nothing. 82% of the murders were created by guns. The other thing that I'm sure is that 100% of the murders is created by murderers. So therefore, we need to see if currently we are productive in getting guns and getting murderers. Make we go to it. Hold on, man. No disruption.
What do you want to go to the bathroom?
This document, page 4. In 2017, January 1 to April 30th, in 2017, there were 4,152 arrests nationally. In 2018, the period of the state of emergency, there were 3,145 arrests, meaning that since the state of emergency, there has been mathematically a, let me see what my mathematics there, 24% reduction in arrest. There's been a 24. All right, I'm glad you come with that. I always like, sometimes I have some people who go out like them bright, but they never read. So make a carry it to him now. He said it has been more efficient. Arrest with evidence. So there is arrest in itself. But arrest with evidence, that is the efficiency. The one where you're likely to convict him. Arrest with evidence. Arrest with firearm. Arrest with stolen property. Arrest with offensive weapons. In 2017, arrest with evidence was 1,243. In 2018, the period of the state of emergency, arrest with evidence was 584. Remember, look for my maths. That is a 53% reduction. What is the ratio? I'll just give a 53% reduction. That's almost 2 to 1. That's almost a 2 to 1 ratio.
Almost.
Well, me just tell you. Let me give him again. In 2017, between January and April, when there was no state of emergency, arrest with evidence was 1,243. In 2018, the period that there is a state of emergency, arrest with evidence declined dramatically to 584. My God. Total arrest during the period. 2018, But we not said in the book. Page 2. 2018, 3,145. 2017, 4,152. In 2017, oh God, you're surprised like me. I was surprised when I saw it. So when people jumping up said this is working, let me tell you something more. 2015, arrest 5,319. You know shame? You know feel bad about it?
But crime increase.
But crime increase.
Senator Reid. Senator Reid. Senator Reid.
Yes. Yeah, because...
Senator Reid.
Mr. President.
Senator Reid.
What this has shown is, I am going to assume that arrests, in particular with evidence, are the perpetrators of crime. What this has shown, my brother Senator, is that it is non-productive. I don't want everybody to know what's going on here. Let's look at what caused crime now. 82% of crime was carried out by guns. 82% of murders. This was in the police report. Let me find it. Hold on. Everybody have a chance. Give me my time. Implements used in murder. Guns, 82%. Knives, 5.3%. Machete, 3.4%. And other, 9.1%. So something tell me logically that if you can get the guns, then you are going to really carry down the crime. Let me go now. Okay. I'm glad. In 2017, January to April, the police seized 275 guns. In 2018, during the state of emergency, they have seized 244 guns. 11% reduction in the number of guns seized. Come now. You are when I your time you read a book and come and talk. In the period before there was a state of emergency. Now remember we teach them about productivity, you know. That input supposed to now lead to greater output. No. Yeah, well. You see when fox are lick. You see when fox are lick. You see when time some bunks are lick up some people in their ribs. Them start flick them butt off of people. Mr. Umpire can't take it no more, Mr. Umpire. When time? Ready now? Yes. Hold on now. Where Senator Charles is?
Line on it.
I wanted Senator Charles here, you know. Senator Charles.
Senator Crawford.
Senator Charles.
You know, sometimes if you are teaching a class and the headmistress pass and hear this uproar, they're going to blame you, you know.
You see, they give me the wrong class, sir. And give me some people with disability. Ready? Ready again. Senator Charles said in a period before, he said that every bullet taken off the road is a life save. I don't forget that. Yes. Now in 2017, the police seized, and no, let me say the period, January to April. I don't want them to think of the whole year. The same period that the state of emergency is in place. The police seized 4,433 ammunition. In 2018, the same period of the state of emergency, the police seized 4,039. That is 394 less. If I should take what Senator Charles said, that is 394 lives. I know me say it. What kind? I have shown you a period that there was no state of emergency, and that period has proven more effective and more efficient than when there was a state of emergency. Now, what I have proven is that it is not working now, and what I have also proven is based on the variables that have contributed to criminal activity, it is unlikely to work in the future. Now, oh my God. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So therefore, I'm a man who always wants to learn. At UE they actually have a system for teachers to go learn more. And I always go, every summer I'm in it, I always go. That is why when I'm beating and teaching, I'm beating and teaching. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. Now ready. I'm saying, thank you, because I get hot all the time, I beat and teach them. Beat and teach them, I can beat them, look more. Hold on. I'm saying, if there is no evidence that this thing is effective, and there is no evidence that this thing is efficient, if you're telling me that the answer to the crime, even in the short term, is a state of emergency, how do you choose who is left to die? How you choose which community will need it based on your lack of resources don't get it? Because Westmoreland right now should demand it. If that is the answer, Westmoreland need it. Why are you not here today with a Westmoreland state of emergency if Westmoreland, how you choose to allow Westmoreland to continue to die? How you choose to allow Clarendon to continue to die? How you choose to allow Bull Bay? You carry what you think is right. In the democratic process, the government have a responsibility as given by the voters to do what they think is right. And you have said to me, and I'm going to teach my kids again, all of us agree that the drink's fresh. But it don't mean that I'm going to agree, say, if I put in salt. Yes, we agree to the objective of fighting crime. But you have the wrong strategy, and I don't agree with that strategy. And I am proving to you with numbers that you're willing to fling out. This is not numbers far and wide apart. This is last year and this year. This is a period that we said it was out of control. The period that them said we could need the state of emergency was better than the period of the state of emergency. You will talk soon, man. I stop paying attention. You're disrupting the class. I'm not learning nothing now. I'm saying to you, therefore, that there is in my mind and in my heart no if nor but. The people in Westmoreland